Welcome back to the channel. Today we're working on our E93 M3. So what happened was the suspension arms, one of the suspension arms got bent because the shop that we went to, TPS Motorsports, they bent one of the control arms because they parked the car crooked on their dyno. So when we were dynoing the car, all of the stress of the car was just on one side of the suspension and it bent our control arm, and after we drove out of the place, it was really misaligned. The car was losing traction so easily and we were just wondering what happened. But we took it to alignment shop and that's what they figured was the one of the suspension arms was bent. So we're going to be replacing the right side of the suspension arm where they attached the hooks to, or the straps, when they were strapping it down on the dyno. As far as the shop owner owning up to the mistake, they didn't, so we have to fix it ourselves and pay for all the parts ourselves. So not too happy about that. That's why I would not recommend going back there if you need to get any work done on the car. So we figured might as well make a DIY video on how to replace your lower rear control arm, because that's responsible for your alignment. And if that arm gets bent, or if anything happens to it, you want to make sure to change it out so that your car is aligned properly and you can drive safely. All right, so it's time to get the jack underneath the control arm, because you got to be able to take the pressure off so that when you release these bolts right over here and here, the spring doesn't come slamming down. So this is an 18 millimeter and this is a 21 millimeter. So the other side is the same thing, it's a 21 millimeter as well. We're gonna just be undoing those, make sure it's supported by the jack. So here's a 21 millimeter wrench. We're going to be putting it on the back side so that we can counter hold and unscrew it. Now we're going to take out the 18 millimeter. $18 millimeter bolts that's holding the strut to the control arm. With the two bolts out, you can slowly lower the jack. So we removed the 18 millimeter and then the 21 millimeter bolt. Now we got to come over here and then remove this. This is the 21 millimeter nut, and the other side is a 21 millimeter bolt over here. Let's take that off and then we can just drop this control arm slowly. There's the spring coming off. All right, so now that the control arm's loose, I recommend taking off your spring first so that it doesn't just drop down and onto your face. This side is an 18 millimeter and this side is a 21 millimeter, and then you just counter hold and spin it. In order to push the bolt out, we have to drop the exhaust like maybe another inch so that I can get this bolt out, because right now it's hitting the heat shield. I was able to undo the 18 millimeter bolt that holds this exhaust hanger right here. Now I'm gonna drop the exhaust a tiny bit and see if I can sneak this out. Okay, I think I have it low enough now that I can pull it out. Here it is. Whew. That was quite a bit of extra work, but not too bad. Just drop the exhaust slightly lower and then you can take this bolt out. Now we can take this off. This is the old arm that was bent. Yep. Okay, so this is the old control arm and this is the newer one. And when you compare it right here, you can see there's a slight amount of difference, like a 1 or 2 millimeter difference right here. This is them evenly lined up. You can tell by the circles. These circles are lined up together, but then right here, this one is like slightly more in. So this one was bent inward more. and that was causing the alignment issue. Something as small, this tiny little amount of bent on the control arm can really affect your alignment. So we're going to go ahead and install this one just like that. All right, let's get the new control arm in. So I'm going to put it right here first, and then let's get that long bolt through this one. All right, so once you're got your bolt right through there, go ahead and put your eccentric washer in as well. So now we got to go ahead and then line up this hole to this one and this one to the shock. There we go. Now that we're lined up here, we just have to line up the bolts here. This is the tricky part, is lining this up to the hole. So we'll try our best. Okay, so we've got the 18mm bolt on and the 21mm bolt with the nut on the back side. We've got these ones over here as well. The way to get these all lined up is to have a second person help you, and you can use a screwdriver and kind of pry around to line up the bolts. Probably the hardest part of this job is just lining up this bolt right here. But once you've got it lined up, let's go ahead and torque everything down. You want to hand tighten it first, and then you want to jack up the car so that the suspension is on the weight of the car. The weight of the car is in the suspension, and then once that it's jacked up and off of the jack stands, you can go ahead and torque it to whatever the spec is. I believe it's 120 foot-pounds of torque for these two control arm bolts, the 21mm, and the one over here is 80 foot-pounds of torque for the 18mm. Okay, so we just found out that we had a really bad rear trailing arm. So this part is meant to bend on purpose so that you don't damage other parts of your suspension. Since we had the bad alignment and we were driving it like that for a little bit, I think it was like a week while we were waiting for the parts, it bent this rear trailing arm. Luckily this piece is only about 40 bucks online, so we're gonna have to buy a new one, and then we're gonna replace it. It goes right over here where these two knuckles attach, these two right here. And it is 18mm bolts on both sides. So once we get the new one, we're just gonna slide that in. It's pretty easy on and off. And this part should be straight, not bent like so. So we got the new rear trailing arm in the mail. This is what it's supposed to look like, and this is what the bent one looks like. So pretty big difference. Hopefully this one stays while we drive to the alignment shop and it doesn't bend again. I think we'll just drive real slow just to make sure. So let's go get it back in. Looks like we have to take the lower control arm off to fit this back on, which kind of sucks. So that's why we have Patrick here today to help us with that. Fast forwarding a few minutes later, we lifted up the car on ride suspension or ride height suspension, and then we torqued everything down according to spec. And then you let the car back down. Now we're gonna go drive it to an alignment shop. We're gonna limp it there because it's probably way off alignment. And then we'll get back to you in a sec. So I just got back from the alignment shop and the car is all aligned again. Suspension is looking good. No more difficulties with traction in the rear. That right rear control arm is now aligned properly. And the stance looks great. So if you're gonna get your car dynoed, make sure the car is parked straight on the dyno, not crooked, because it'll put too much tension on one side and end up bending your aluminum control arms. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good evening.